Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host, Javier Proenza, and today my guest is Elmer Guevara. You are an Angelino, right? Like you are legit born and raised. You said South Central?
Yeah, dude, I was homegrown pretty much. My parents came here in the '80s, and I was
From El Salvador?
from El Salvador. Yeah, they were fleeing the Civil War, and
Which was pretty dirty. We've talked about it a few times on this show.
yeah,
How much do you know about that? We don't have to start with the
Um,
darkness of it, but
I know a little bit from them, like
yeah.
more testimony thing from them. But most of what I know is like based on research that I've done my own. Like I've read memoirs and seen a lot of documentaries that I found.
Uh-huh.
Um, I've also had the chance to visit a museum that's based on the war in El
El Salvador.
Salvador. So I mean I know plenty, and I use a lot of imagery from it from different sources of media. So
Yeah.
I've seen, but never experienced it, obviously. But yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's always interesting. I always find like the Americanos from a global south. You're first generation, so I have that in common with you.
Yeah.
Where like you speak Spanish still.
I do. I do. It's I think I was mentioning earlier that it's a really nice thing to like still have, and it's really nice to be able to use it,
Yeah.
and wherever I go or whatever. And you do connect to people who don't speak English and speak Spanish more, or like that's their first language. You do connect more directly with people because you
Yeah,
speak
yeah,
it,
yeah.
So
And you realize that they also don't like immigration.
yeah.
It's one of the greatest ironies of the language barrier is that if you talk to Latinos, they're like, no,
Yeah.
because they're trying to run away. I think it's unfortunate that they don't. Not everybody that comes over here knows the full history of like, because it's American history. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And like, some of us have to like, it's hard to take that shit on. You've come over here and you don't necessarily want to go back and be like burdened by the, like you don't want to victimize yourself to the American system, you know, to the American empire.
For sure.
So I get like that's a lot of Cuban people are like, nah, it's great over here.
I actually worked with a Cuban dude when I was in New York. And,
Oh yeah,
and like I mean like obviously I went through school, like the school system, and it could be pretty liberal in a lot of ways. And,
in New York.
yeah, I mean like yeah, where I studied at Hunter, like it had like it did have some like stuff that was like a little linked to Marxist, but it felt pretty liberal like in terms of like the theories that I would study there. But the Cuban dude that I work with, he was like all for like capitalism, like he's like that's the shit that works and nothing else, So it'd be crazy like to talk to him about like his upbringing and how much he disliked it in Cuba.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
of stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, I think that shit happened in the 50s, so it's like there's no there's not enough of like a Cuban history
Yeah.
without the embargo and all of that. It gets very complicated. That's what I mean about like with Cubans, like it's really hard to talk to them about like any kind, like they are so skittish about any talk of communism because like their parents lived through or their grandparents lived through a revolution. My parents lived through it, they were like, so there's also like a weird thing because it wasn't until Obama implemented wet foot, dry foot that we didn't have open borders because people were like, it was a sanctuary situation for them, like they,
Yeah.
so like my parents came, they only had to stay in the US for 15 years and they got immigration, like, or they got they got US citizenship.
Yeah.
So like, it's a very, like Cubans have been treated very differently, like, or their experience of empire is very different.
For sure. I actually got to visit it.
I've
Like,
never been.
I have.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was there once. Maybe about I'd say like 4 years ago I went, and it's a trip. It's a really trippy like capsule sort of there,
Yeah.
But being able to go to their museums and see how different their art is too, it's like super interesting, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's very cool. So then what kind of imagery are you, well, let's do a pretty, like, I want to congratulate you publicly
Yeah.
on, you just got you signed or represented. What's the
This
nomenclature?
representation.
You got
Yeah,
representation
yeah.
through Charlie James, which is a very dope space that I think a lot of us that are in the scene like quite a bit. So that's a pretty big, big
Yeah.
event.
Yeah, it's pretty fresh. It's
Yeah.
a pretty fresh thing
Well,
still, but
then we get to talk about the excitement without the delusion yet.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, it's they're I'd see them as a staple in LA, and
Yeah.
so being a part of the roster there and being among others that are in the roster that are like, you know, some of the greats that I've seen around here. So it's a super privileged
Yeah.
position to like be in, I think, and I'm super thankful to join and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have a show there, and then midway through the show, you got signed. Can we talk a little bit about, or you got
I think you can
you
say
say
sign.
sign,
It
right?
sounds
It's like
like
a sign,
it. Yeah,
like
yeah.
a record label.
It's. I think the two terms work.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
See how far that is from
No. It
from my reality.
some people do say it that way, so
Yeah.
it's not for sure.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So then, like, so thematically, you mentioned that some of the research that you've done about El Salvador
Mm-hmm.
shows up in the work. What like are you what in what context? Like, are you doing historical like painting about
Okay.
like? Go ahead.
It's so I think one direct way that I do it is like I use this transfer technique. Like if you see my work, a lot of the limbs and the figures have these graphic imagery that they're basically photos that I've collaged and manipulate through different like Photoshop and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And those imagery that I pull that does derive from that Civil War era, they do come from like screenshots of videos or films that try to recreate
Mm-hmm.
those historic moments, right? And so I also look at a lot of different books that are like photography books of that time of photographers that were going into the country during the war and taking documentation, right? So I'm looking at all that sort of stuff, whatever I can find online as well. And then so I kind of take clippings and manipulate it and crop stuff and make collages essentially digitally. And then those get implemented and kind of get inputted into the surface of the canvas that then I later add paint or.
So, a technical question: how are you transferring them?
So
like
I
linseed oil or
no
sorry,
no It's a gel. It's a gel
gel
medium.
medium.
Yeah,
Cool.
pretty traditional like how it's done.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty old technique, and yeah, just what's I think difficult about it is like making it the collage more
Mhm.
so, warping it and then measuring it out first so it has like a nice fit in the area that I put it in.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like what the challenge is, I think.
Does it read like? How does it read? I actually haven't seen them up close.
It's
I haven't been to the show yet,
so
unfortunately.
it's okay. So in terms of texture, it's actually a very smooth finish.
Okay.
It's a little bit smoother than the way I apply paint, so it does change a little in terms of how it's applied. Yeah, so it's just a little smoother, but it's like it's also very ghostly. So it's like when you see it, I think from a distance before you walk up to the painting, like it kind of looks like texture
Okay.
more than it like images
Okay.
because it's very airy and so it's kind of a slow read because I also apply paint on top a little, like very translucent paint layers.
Yeah.
So it takes a little bit of a while to get into it, well, walking into it and then seeing it,
But does it read like tattoos when you warp it on? Is that the intention?
Sort, I mean,
not always.
It's
Because you said on limbs. That's what I'm trying to.
yeah. It's a lot of people read it as tattooing.
Okay.
It's the only thing that's different is that I'm actually trying to make it feel like a liquid, like more
Okay.
so, or something that's like floating inside of those limbs.
Okay.
And that's just based on like kind of like the inherited trauma theme that I use too. And then, so the imagery is playing a role of like memory that's like living inside of our
Yeah.
figure body. Yeah. So so it's very airy, but it does resemble tattoos, and a lot of people do read them as like tattoos and stuff. But sometimes I'll have like little toddlers like that are full of it, so it's like it's kind of
inked up toddlers.
yeah. So it's kind of funny, but I think it's like I think it's slightly different than tattooing because tattooing you kind of choose what you put on your body.
Yeah.
Opposed to like the way that I'm seeing it with it floating inside the figure, it's more of like what's being passed on to you without willingly, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is that heavy to talk about? Are you comfortable talking about like what that trauma?
I mean, it's
I mean, because we've addressed it a little bit, but we haven't talked about it specifically. Like, how do you feel?
yeah.
I mean, because I can tell you how I feel about it, like Celio.
It's confusing a little because I don't know too much about it, and my family's like, they haven't been very open about it either, you know. So I think a lot of Salvadoran families that came during that time chose to kind of shut it out.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it's just me trying to like, I don't know. I know it's in me somehow because I came through them, you know. So I'm just like constantly just wondering like what those experiences were to them and what sort of that experience makes me, or you know, I just psychologically I'm thinking of what's been passed on to me, and then to add to that on top, like my upbringing kind of has like some moments of trauma as well, like growing up in South Central and in the late 90s, like, you know, as
Well,
a
I mean,
kid.
it could also be argued that that's a continuation, right? Because if you had been able to thrive within your country without imperialism affecting it, socialism might have thrived.
For sure.
You know, like I mean, Cuba, part of like the Latin American thing, Cuba is like a linchpin in all of that because they're the villain.
Yeah.
You know, and then it's kind of like Cuba gives all the doctors, right? And then now like when you're getting doctors from Cuba, then you're on the beds, you know.
Yeah. No, I do wonder like what would have happened if like it wasn't like all that stuff that happened. I would have probably been born in the old country, you know, opposed to coming here. So yeah, I mean, I think it is connected. You know, they came to a low income neighborhood because obviously they were migrating here. So
yeah. My parents, I think that the in Miami there was a white flight that was very, very big, and you can still see the parts of the city that were like kind of zoned and easy to get into but hard to get out of. Like, you know, like not a lot of exits into the other part. Like Hialeah, I feel is a little bit like that. Like you go blocks and blocks and blocks and you can't cross this one canal.
That's funny. That's interesting that you guys also had that, because South Central also did. You know, it was a white neighborhood in the 60s and 50s.
Yeah, but then what's interesting about Miami is that just like, you know, everybody came, like all the capitalists, all the hungry capitalists came, right? Or they were like people that were dispossessed in their youth. They lost all of their wealth, but because America was playing that game with them, they're like, yeah, you guys can have Miami. And then like you go to Miami, there's nowhere you can go without speaking Spanish, whereas over here there's generations of Mexicans that don't speak any Spanish.
It's just been here so long. I mean, also too, especially LA being a part of Mexico at one point, you know? So it's just
old. The border moved.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure.
Well, the whole thing with Cuba was that it was like a vassal state, right? Like it was super corrupt. They had Bautista. And wait, is that him?
Maybe.
Oh, fuck! Now my cred is gone.
This is before Castro. Right?
Batista, not Bautista. Batista was the president. He was the guy that Castro overthrew. But it's crazy because the shit, like, you know, like people talk about the exoduses, right? Like, you know, and like after Trump came in, like, cause you went 4 years ago. So that was that was during the Trump year. Yeah. That was during the Trump years. So that's like when the embargo came back.
I think it was probably like right after I was there. Like when it came back.
When it came back.
So I got to go. It was exciting, dude.
Yeah.
It was really exciting to see everything there.
Yeah. Apparently that was like the good period. But it's like what you were saying about it being a time capsule. It's like they have like cars from the 50s and shit because they don't get new stuff.
Yeah, no, but it just kind of showed too how ingenium they are. You know, I was just like tripping out because like you see like a fucking beautiful shell, but like a Plymouth or some shit, right? And like but you see it break down, like the taxis will break down and they'll pop it open. It's like a fucking Honda engine in there or something.
It's like a case
wild shit. Yeah, but I saw sorts of like crazy ones like that. But yeah, just to sit in those cars that, especially coming from LA, car culture here. So it was like, it was a really cool thing to sit in those whips, man. I was just like, whoa, it was really, really cool. I walked a lot too, though. I only spent time in Havana, so
Yeah.
I walked a lot too, though. But whenever we did like travel a little out, we'd take those cabs, and it was cool, man. It's a really, really, really cool thing to sit in for sure.
What was so like for me? Here's a question for me. Like when I moved to LA, there was definitely a lot of things to get used to. What are the things that you noticed when you moved to New York? Obviously, New York has its own thing. It's pretty aggressive. Have you lived anywhere else other than New York?
No,
No.
so it's just been here and about 3 years in New York, on and off.
How was the East Coast? Did you find it as abrasive as most people say it is?
It was pretty. It was a lot more aggressive for sure than LA. I feel like people here, like, it is a big city, so you are moving a lot here too, but it feels a little bit slightly more mellow, I would say. Like,
Mhm.
people are a little bit, I would say, calmer here about things.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
not everyone, but at least that's the way that it feels. It feels when I come back, right? New York was like, you jump off at Kennedy or LaGuardia or whatever, and you're like, you gotta hit the ground, like literally sprinting. Things
Yeah,
are
yeah,
just
yeah.
moving so quickly, and so it was adjusting to the speed
Uh-huh.
was one, and then the cost of living there was like even higher than here, which was crazy already to think
Yeah.
about that, because I'm like, shit, it's already expensive here, but going over there was just like a little bit more.
It's the first time you lived somewhere else, right?
Yeah,
You've
yeah,
traveled though, right?
yeah, a
Yeah.
lot.
Where have you been? Where do you like?
I've been to Europe, Italy, Spain, and France.
Are you into like Renaissance classical painting and stuff like that? Because you're pretty
Yeah,
technically
very much,
okay.
man.
So that
Yeah.
was what brought you out to Italy? That interest, or just
I was actually there for a show. Both times I went to Italy were for shows, but the second time was I had the solo opening, did the show thing for a bit, and then I spent like an extra 5 days there. And so we were in Milan, and then went down to Rome
yeah.
to see all the stuff. And it's great. It's amazing because it's a lot of the stuff that you covered during art history to see it in person, and I'm a big fan of it, obviously. So it was just like a crazy experience to be
Yeah.
to
And
be in front of all that stuff.
And not just that, like the golden ratio architecture, right? Like where you're like,
And
oh,
and the food, dude.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and the
yeah.
food was just like, wow, it was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up there when I was little in Rome,
Oh,
so
sick.
that's why I got excited when you mentioned Italy.
Yeah.
Those were that's how I got into art.
That's so cool. I mean, it must have been crazy. I did wonder when I was walking around, like, damn, like these kids that grow up in the city have like,
just take the bus, man.
damn, and like to have the access of all that stuff there is incredible, dude.
They don't take it for granted either. And you know what they do out there? They do this thing called ramucchiare, which is just go pick up girls, like tourist ladies.
Yeah. I bet. I mean, it's a lot of tourism there for sure.
Yeah. It's its own cultural thing.
So yeah, I've been to Europe, been to Cuba, in the Caribbean, been obviously to Mexico City, been to a couple places in South America too.
Have you ever been back to El Salvador?
Yeah, I was there 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have to talk about what's going on now.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know. But it's pretty.
I mean, it's kind of crazy, dude. Like, I know a lot of people don't agree with what's happening there.
Yeah.
But it's really cool to like be able to visit your family and not worry, dude.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't go for so long, you know. And to go back was like, it was great.
Yeah.
But for sure, it's
just all of that stuff seems like anything that right wing seems like it's got like the American seal of approval, like the open air prison that they're trying to turn Honduras into. It's really scary. But it's nice that you got to visit. But yeah, like the all of that, like it's so hard to be from cultures where you're like where it just your history makes you sad.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I agree.
Like for years, you know.
Yeah.
But okay, so then tell me a little bit because when I talked to Josh, We talked a little bit about like life in South Central, and I did not realize it was as crazy as it was. Just
Yeah.
like, I mean, it just seems like it was pretty wild. So you mentioned we don't have to go like, I mean, or you can say what you were gonna say. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna ask, like, you mentioned, is there, like, is that what you mean by trauma, like in growing up here? Because you mentioned that there was like the generational element, which I think the generational element is really interesting because from what you were saying, it sounds like you're dealing with the emotional like hurt that you experience, like you feel it, it's radiating from the from your family members that don't want to talk about it
Yeah,
because they don't want to talk about it, and then you have to access it yourself.
for sure.
And then to some degree there's also like maybe a like it's hard to not be able to like learn these things, and then like obviously you don't want to talk to your parents about it,
Yeah.
but then now you're carrying it independently, you know what I mean? And like as a youngster, like, you know, because all of the Cuban shit is all about spies, and it
Yeah.
has like intrigue.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, like my mom dated a guy that got busted, who was a professor at FIU, that got busted for being a spy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of that is probably hype. Your guys is like um much more visceral, right? There's like a
Yeah.
lot more active violence. Ours is about starvation, and I think that, and you know, political prisoners and like
Mhm.
torture and stuff like that, which is much more CIA kind of like spy novelty, which I think is why like Cubans get obsessed with
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
I think too. I think I want to say probably the biggest reason why I like gravitate to the past history a lot is because like we did have casualties in our family as well.
Oh wow.
So it's certain people too that are gone that I didn't get to meet and stuff. So I constantly ponder on it. I think the other thing too is because it caught me off guard. I didn't know for a long time why my parents left
Yeah, yeah.
until I was a little older and I found out.
Like how old were you?
Probably a teenager or something, dude. They honestly never brought it up. Like I just thought they were just here like every other family, until
Mm.
I realized that, oh shit, you and like a bunch of other people came here because of a reason that something was happening. So I being super curious about it, that's how I started to dig up on it because I'm like, whoa, like, oh shit, something happened. That's why you came here.
Yeah.
Because I would remember my mom specifically talking a lot about like how the old times were, like where they were able to like walk around at night and they were able to do things that were pretty sound for any sort of like society, right? And then knowing why they left and figuring out that there was actual conflict going on, and that's how I started to look into it more.
Yeah.
Became super interested because of it being kept away from me for forever, almost until I was old enough to know. So that's what drove me to like.
What was your early like, because obviously when you are first generation,
Mhm.
you're very much aware that you are not, like, especially here, you're very aware that you're not Mexican, although you're probably lumped in a lot, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What was, before you got into that, what was your conception of it being Salvadoran?
So it was kind of cool in a way, dude, because I grew up in like a, I would call it, it's called like a vecindad.
Okay.
So, but it's basically like, it was like 8 apartments that were just all flat, like basically like simple box architecture
Mhm.
apartments. So, there was just like 8 apartments that were all like flat apartments that I grew up in South Central. And, lucky enough, I grew up in a hub that was like pretty much like we all kind of knew each other or we were either cousins, but they were all sort of from like very close region in El Salvador that
Mhm.
all lived there. Like we probably had like one Mexican neighbor and then the rest of us were all like Salvadoran.
Mhm.
So I knew what I was and I knew that I was different than Mexican kids.
Yeah,
Also
yeah.
because at school. So like people kind of carried it with them like, oh shit, I'm Mexican. And so I knew, I was like, oh shit, I'm not that.
Yeah, yeah,
My
yeah.
music sounds different. The food I eat looks different. Like
Yeah,
all
yeah.
this stuff I kind of knew because my parents always did their thing the way that they would do it back home. So I grew up with it and I knew it sounded different than other things that I saw. So yeah, I think once I got into like, I don't know, maybe as far back as like first grade, I kind of knew. It's like, oh shit, like we're a different
Yeah.
culture, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, it kind of grew pride too. I grew pride because of it too, because I knew it was like a smaller thing here.
What kind of cultural heritage that is not war and awful, sad?
Yeah,
Have you discovered? I mean, because we that shit's so heavy, we'll probably get back to it.
for
But
sure.
I want to, you know,
I think the food, the music, the food for sure is very like its own thing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's cool because we bring all that stuff out during holidays. You know, even though we do celebrate like American holidays like Thanksgiving or whatever, we don't cook turkey. Like we
Yeah.
cook like our own dishes, you know, and stuff like that. I'm sure like a lot of immigrant families do their own thing that way too. But
Yeah.
for sure, like that's been a one thing that's like far from like just the war thing and music.
Mhm.
Cumbias, you know, like cumbias are the thing there. You know, I know it's a Colombian. There, it comes from Colombia, or I think that's where it was first like done. But there's a big thing there with cumbias too in El Salvador. So the music's slightly different. So those two things for sure, like you know, the happier side, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, now back to the darkness.
yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
That's okay.
No, that I mean that's really interesting because all those cultural experiences, I mean, they get so washed, you know, in terms of like how people perceive you and
Yeah.
whatnot, and then like it is interesting when we like because the other thing that I would say that is kind of one of the things that like maybe I've experienced. You said that you mentioned earlier that New York was a lot more liberal and less Marxist. So is Marxism something that you feel like you because I know a dude who's Salvadoran. I've had him on the show.
Yeah.
Yeltsin Pinado, which is like a Russian last name.
I don't think I know him, but
No. I wasn't saying it like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I'm just saying that like he has a very like Russian inspired, you know, like Soviet. Well, I mean, I guess it's from the fall, which is kind of interesting.
yeah.
But like, do you feel like socialism is like a big? Because I mean, that's part of what the war.
Well, like I like yeah, like my parents. I remember them telling me that like the guerrilla forces would go into because they were raised in a very rural, like very mountainy like area.
Mhm.
So a lot of the from what I understand is that a lot of the guerrilla forces like that's kind of what they occupied mostly was like the mountains
And
opposed
those
to
are the right
cities.
wing, or the who were
Those
the
were
guerrillas?
those were
The socialists or
yeah,
the right
yeah,
wing? Okay,
yeah. Those were I think they were following communist ideologies though.
okay.
But like yeah, they would go up to these towns and like try to like basically like recruit people, but a lot of it was recruitment through like these talks that they would have. I remember my mom also telling me that like churches were kind of in on it. So when you would go to church, like the church would kind of speak of these newer ideas, you know, that they were bringing out, that they were more communist based, right? But yeah, like I remember growing up and like my mom telling me crazy stuff that I didn't know, I didn't understand till later. I'm like, oh shit, it's because they kind of like were told certain things, you know. But like she would always say like shit like, yo, it's not a crime. It's not like stealing if you steal from the rich, sort of.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? Like they kind of like had that drilled in them. But I think it comes from like communicating with these people that were kind of bringing in these ideas to these
Yeah.
little towns.
Well,
You know?
it's surprisingly similar to La Revolucion, you know,
Yeah,
where it's
yeah.
like the campesino, and I think a lot of I mean, humans will debate me on this, but my grandparents have told me that they at first were into it, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
they, you know,
Then they found out that it
yeah,
didn't
then they
work
got all
out.
their shit taken away,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it was kind of like sorry, it's like a similar thing there. I think that was like trying to happen.
Well, I mean, yeah, that like that's kind of why Che was not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not a coincidence that your last name is Guevara.
For sure. I mean, I'm not related to him in any way, but at least not that I know.
Not that you know of.
But yeah, there was
I
a
mean, he
bunch
would
of
have
that.
had to get around a lot since the 50s.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting to like kind of like I saw those little glimpses of that happening in the household as well. You know.
So you think so? Your parents were were in support of the socialist revolution, or
So I had two uncles. I had a couple uncles actually, and a couple cousins that fought with the military.
are you good talking about this? I don't
Yeah.
want to make it all about,
No,
but this
no,
is
no.
super interesting, and I don't
No,
think
it's
most people
totally
know
fine.
about it.
It's totally fine.
Cool,
So
cool,
I
cool.
had family kind of like on both parties.
Both sides. Okay.
Yeah. So it just kind of happened, I guess. I think whenever there's civil war, there's always like that where
But there were also it wasn't just like, I mean, there were also the what's it called, the U.S. trained what are they called, the people that went that did El Mozote.
yeah, but that was like that was essentially the military, like
So
the
that
country's military.
the country's military.
Yeah. So the campesinos and everyone else was like the other party, basically.
But those guys were like, I mean, because there's like a huge cover up with John Abrams, I think it is, who just got assigned into the Biden administration.
Yeah.
It was like, there's that video of Ilhan Omar chewing him out back when Ilhan Omar like did stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, man. I mean, the U.S. was heavily involved in supporting that military.
For sure.
Right?
I don't know too much about like the name you just brought up, that person.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I mean, there is definitely like the School of the Americas.
Yeah, that's okay. The School of the
I
Americas.
know that stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
All that was like coming into there too.
Yeah, yeah.
It was part of it for sure. Yeah.
Like American, and they always do that. They have like very American, like they had the in Venezuela they had the what's his name, Juan Guaido.
Okay. Yeah.
Have you seen the videos of that
No,
guy?
no.
Like, oh man. So he was in Congress like during the Trump years, and like all the Democrats and the Republicans were like, yeah, he's the new president of Venezuela. As soon as like Biden needed money, like, or needed oil from them, like recently,
Yeah.
they were like, okay, Maduro, what's up, president? And then now this guy, when he's like walking around like Venezuela, because like I think he had to flee to Miami.
Okay.
But while he would go, there's video of him in a restaurant where like people are just trying to beat his ass and like ripping his clothes off and stuff like that. And it's so funny, like when people are like whenever you see, I'm not gonna say what wars are happening right now because it's a little hot topicy on YouTube.
Yeah.
But it's so funny when people are like, yeah, this new leader, because they did that for Guaido. And there's always a new like resistance fighter that is like, carrying the fight, and he's the legitimate person, and it's like all for capitalism.
For sure. For sure. It's I feel like it's kind of rare when it benefits the people from those countries, so.
Yeah. I think also like Mexicans don't really have the same, I mean, they have a lot of like they're on the border, so they eat they eat a lot of American imperialism.
For sure.
But it's interesting, like now they're talking about like going in and like invading Mexico, which is crazy. So we'll see. Like I think Marco Rubio, it's so much fun. White people don't know about this at all. I mean, I'm talking about like WASP American liberals.
Yeah.
Like they don't know, because I'm obviously a white Latino, but like they have no concept of all like this, like how scary it is when like someone like Rubio is like, yeah, we're gonna fight the cartels over there.
Right. Yeah. I don't know too much about like the whole Mexican invasion thing, but yeah, dude. I mean, it's always something, right?
Yeah. Never a dull moment with our history.
For sure.
So then, tell me a little bit more about growing up in South Central, or like, because I mean, so you went to Cal State Long Beach, right?
For undergrad. Yeah.
For undergrad.
Yeah.
So, was it like, when did you start getting into art? Like, what was it like? What was the first? Because I like, you have a very different perspective and different style than like Josh. You guys are from the same area though, right? Like
he's from Pico Union,
and
I'm from South Central. So Pico Union is like kind of just a little bit like the tad bit west of downtown LA, and I'm like south of downtown LA.
And Pico Union's popping now, right? Like as an art neighborhood, isn't it?
It's definitely changing from what it was.
Yeah, they're like gentrifying it.
It's just so close to downtown, I think. So it's like one of those, like downtown is like slowly absorbing a lot of these neighborhoods that are close by. So
But when you were growing up, was downtown chill?
nah, dude,
Yeah, yeah.
it really was nothing like it. Honestly, like from what I remember, there was like I remember my dad taking me to theaters there. There was actually a lot of movie theaters on Broadway. A lot of those theaters that are there that are used for other shit now, like stores, you know,
Uh-huh.
they were actually movie theaters. And so I remember faint memories of going to those things. But yeah, it also wasn't very safe to. From what I remember, it wasn't safe to be there, dude. Like
Yeah,
after
yeah, yeah.
after it started to get dark, you know. Um, Even when I was a teenager and I was going around there, it was still very like not safe on Broadway and stuff like that. So it was downtown was very different. Like there was even like full on neighborhoods there, like gangs that
Mhm.
had turf there, like on those streets that you see now with restaurants and bars and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was very different. It was super not safe. And and I remember, yeah, it was
Wh- What do you think about like not being able to buy a house for less than $1 million now? Like, well, it wasn't always like that, was it?
no, I don't think so. Like I've heard of people like buying stuff in the 80s, probably like I don't know, I'd say like in the 200s or some
Yeah,
shit.
right.
Yeah, but no, it's crazy. I think it's a little frustrating too, like being from here and like
I
not being
bet.
able to
Yeah.
like probably stay here, you know, type
Yeah.
of thing. Yeah, dude, it's a thing I think about a lot because my parents didn't buy real estate, so I'm not inheriting any real estate. So
Yeah.
it's like so I like it's something I do look forward to and really want it to be here, but it's like it's becoming a thing that's like oh shit, just like slowly like
Yeah. Yeah.
feathering away, you know. It's like out of reach almost, so
Yeah. And everybody's been like, for the last 5 years, I've been like hearing people telling me not to buy anything. Not that I could have ever afforded anything. I was just like, I was starting to look, and they were like,
yeah.
"Oh, it's gonna crash. Don't even, you know." And I was like,
Everybody's
"Yeah."
waiting.
I think that, like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like they're adding enough houses, like homes, to the supply. There's,
Yeah, the other thing too is like if you go to like certain neighborhoods, you're buying $1 million homes that are like over 100 years old,
yeah,
like
yeah,
stuff like that, which is kind of crazy, you know.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, in this neighborhood, the houses are probably crazy in price. Like, and I see them all getting fixed up.
yeah,
But I think that there's like a huge movement now in corporate, like in companies like BlackRock and Vanguard, that are like, there's a new term that I'd never heard, which is built to rent real estate, which is like they're just straight up buying out entire neighborhoods,
damn,
like because they buy them cash, and they buy them like over market value,
yeah,
so that, because it's still cheaper for them, because then they can set the, like, it's almost like we're going back towards panopticon,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, where, which is, panopticon is like uh where like towns where, like, the, like, you know, the company towns where you, the company pays you in their own money, and
yeah.
then they tax you, and then like you have to pay for the rent, and so by the end of it, like, you have no, I
It's
mean, that's
like
kind of where
it's
we're
like
at
that
already.
whole hacienda term where it's like you live there, you work there, you pay rent there, so it's like the same money is just kind of coming back
Yeah,
to the same pocket,
yeah,
sort of,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
not getting paid. You're like, you're not building any wealth
Yeah,
and stuff.
it's almost
Yeah,
like you're a slave there. You know, you're kind of
yeah,
just stuck there. So yeah, it's like I said, it's frustrating to like to wrap your like head around that to know that you can't you might not be able to stay in the place that you're
yeah.
from. It's kind of crazy.
I don't know. Yeah. Hopefully the fires will get so bad. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
That the
Uh,
proper, that's one of the crazy things that's happening in Florida right now. A lot of people are moving to Florida because they're trying to like stay out. I don't know why they think that, like, or maybe people are like leaving fire and forgetting that there's hurricanes, but like the insurance premiums, like
or
15,
high.
yeah, 15, like 15 companies, insurance companies, have left Florida because, like, my whole life, I mean, there, it's rampant fraud. Like,
Yeah.
the people, like, hurricanes come and people just, you know, whack the shit out of stuff.
I didn't obviously like being from California. I never thought about moving to Florida, but when I lived in New York, like it seemed like that was a New Yorker
Yeah, that's the
like sort
pipeline.
of thing. Like oh,
Yeah,
let's go to Florida, let's go to Florida, which was interesting. I've been to Miami before, so it's like
for Basel.
nah. I was there working one time for like about a week, and that's the only time I got to see Miami really. But I mean, it's I don't know, it's just so different in New York. Like, it trips me out that people go down there.
Yeah. No, it is. But I mean, it's always been kind of the thing. I think it's getting too crazy now, though. I think that like I've been back and the traffic just kills me. And compared to LA, it's really bad. People like they don't. There's like this attitude that people have over there where the light will turn red and then they'll still go and just block the intersection, and it happens. It's just like a cultural thing that happens.
What do they do? They just back up, or
no? They just block
so
and they
you
get
go
honked
around
at.
it?
Like, yeah, it's a nightmare. It really is. Like,
Man, that would be crazy to see that here.
yeah. No, dude, you'd get shot here.
Yeah, that sounds pretty crazy.
Someone will get out of the car and kick your door in
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, no, it was maddening, and like my mom was driving, and it was still driving me crazy.
Sounds insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of wanted to just go back to like how you were asking me about how downtown was.
Yeah,
And
yeah, for
I can
sure.
kind of
Yeah.
tell you a little bit about my neighborhood when I was coming up too.
Yeah, for sure.
That's also like been sort of changing a little too. But so I was born in '90, and so like I probably remember from like '98 up, sort of thing. But even before that, like I just like why it was sort of like an impactful upbringing was because there was tons of gangs everywhere. So like
Mhm.
every block had kind of like a neighborhood. That's what they would call like their gang or
Yeah.
whatever neighborhoods. So seeing that, it was crazy. It was like everywhere. Like it was the '90s thing to sort of fit into those cultures if you were.
But it was fun, like GTA, right?
I mean,
Grove Street.
I mean, like when I remember vaguely playing that game, and I did see some of the purple stuff. So it's like, I mean, it's crazy, but I don't know, like I guess just also living in New York and not having lived anywhere else, I saw gangs in New York that it was a lot different than the gang
Mhm.
culture here. Gang culture here was like it was everywhere. Like it was very, especially in South Central, it's like every block had a neighborhood, like a different gang, and sometimes, and because of that reason, there was always conflict. So
Yeah.
I grew up seeing that shit, like robberies, shootings, shootouts with cops and gangs, shootouts between gangs and gangs.
That's like the Super Predator era, the Hillary Clinton said, called,
Yeah. With the three strike thing and all that
Yeah,
shit.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she was in the three strike thing. The Biden, they did the crime bill. Biden did the
Yeah.
crime bill and all of that, which was equally bad.
Yeah.
Three strikes started here, which was crazy.
It's
I remember.
so wild.
Yeah.
It's so wild that I think some people ended up being a part of that shit through like marijuana sales and stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. But yeah, it's all that, and on top of that, there was still like lingerings of like the crack epidemic in South Central. So there was a lot of that stuff also happening.
You were probably 5 or 6. So wait, when was the LA riot?
It was in '92.
92,
So I was
so-
about 2 years old. That's actually another of the events that I use a lot in my work.
Well, I was gonna say that, like, just because it happened in '92 doesn't mean they reconstructed all the things that got burned down.
No, dude.
Yeah.
So what's crazy? It's like I grew up doing graffiti throughout LA, but mostly South Central and downtown. So there was tons of what we call yards, which were like empty lots.
Yeah.
And like everywhere, dude. And like that's another thing that I didn't find out till a little later, that those were the lots that got burned down. Like there were actually buildings there during the
Yeah.
uprisings that were burned, that created those lots, that created these yards that we all painted in the neighborhood, right? So
Yeah.
that shit was interesting too. And then now those empty lots are becoming like apartments. So it's like it was kind of weird, but that was like even 10 years later, it was still like a lot of empty lots everywhere that were still dating back from that time in '92. And so like there was still like little remnants of those 3 days of like
Yeah.
chaos in the city,
Yeah.
like even years later. So I use it. I use the event a lot too, in my work, because I was physically born and alive, but I obviously don't recollect anything. But
It's gonna
that's-
leave an imprint.
but
Yeah.
it's also a thing that I heard a lot of different stories from neighbors who were
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there, people who broke into pawn shops in the neighborhood or the stores and all that stuff. And it's I grew up listening to all the stories, and like that shit was like, and then seeing like documentaries later and photos, I'm like, damn, that was a crazy time.
Was there any element to it like it was with that blackout in New York where people started buying like or started stealing equipment that they couldn't to produce music? Did that shit happen? Like, or was it?
Nah, I think people were
just like not.
I think it was just like from what I've learned from it, like looking at certain documentaries and stuff. I think it was just like a pretty hostile time because of unemployment stuff that was happening and like a bunch of shit that just kind of bottled in and it fucking popped at that time.
So it doesn't have the romance.
I don't know, man. Like, I mean, it's crazy.
Because people are like, hip hop started
in
that blackout.
I don't know, man.
All the documentaries. No, I don't think so. I think it was like a lot worse.
Yeah.
Because also like just because of the layout, of LA is there probably weren't a lot of like, like really nice stores in South Central during that time where people could like, I saw one of the guys, I forget what his name is because it's been a while, but I saw a Vlad TV, so take it with a grain of salt. But during the Black Lives Matter thing, they were asking somebody who was like one of the guys that's like in Eazy-E's camp and swears that Suge Knight stuck him with the syringe and all of that. Like, and he was saying that like, like what people don't realize is that when you burn your shit down, like you don't have shit. which was an interesting perspective that I had never heard about the LA riots, and you can tell that dude was living there.
For sure, because that was one of the things I think that happened after. Like they didn't have resources for a while. Like stores were not like trying to like hurry up and like re-up because their shits were all fucked up, so like you kind of did yourself in a way. Like you took stuff, but then there wasn't shit coming back for a while, so I'm sure people were there like struggling for a bit there too,
yeah
yeah
it's crazy. So then what's it called, when was 96 was Rodney King? 92. Oh, that is the LA riots. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there hasn't been anything crazy since. That was just OJ. Man, I'm so disappointed with South Central. There's nothing to mine here. No, I'm kidding. No, that's brutal, dude. That is really crazy to grow up. Because, like, I mean, Miami has its whole like, we got really caught up in the drug game. Like my generation of kids. I don't think that people born in the 90s or were that like into like partying the same way, because we were still coming out of the whatchamacallit, the Tony Montana. That was 80s, and it was like, Al Pacino. It was before it was weird that Al Pacino was playing like that accent, dude. It's like the least Cuban accent.
I didn't know a lot of Cubans growing up here in LA. So when I saw that movie, like that was my like, oh shit, that's how Cubans sound or something. I didn't know anything, so I didn't know like there wasn't that many Cubans I encountered like growing up in South Central. Obviously it was just a lot of Central Americans and Mexicans and black folk mostly. So when we saw Scarface, I was like, oh shit, that's how Cubans.
You know what, we did the same, and we were like, yo, we gotta do a lot of coke.
That's cool, man.
No, I mean it's cool for the ones that ended up okay. But it's interesting, all those little like nuances, because I mean, I think that like the gang scene in Miami like was so easy to avoid, you know. But I think once I started getting older in my 20s, then it started to kind of get into the neighborhoods that I was in, like Kendall and all of that. And I remember distinctly that it was people that like, it must have been MS-13, because like, but it's interesting. It's interesting how those things form, right? Like, because we were just talking, like one of the things that you were saying earlier, it's nice to be able to go back and visit your family, and it's safe and all of that. But like some of that shit that they did over here, like the antique gang, it's definitely not as serious as what's happening in El Salvador, but they also wouldn't let like two men. I learned a lot from the Nipsey Hussle's death, where about how like a lot of rules were designed to not let like people congregate together, because there was like the fear of gangs, anti-gang rules that sort. I forget what they're fucking called.
I mean, I think there's always been like a history of trying to dissolve
Yeah,
groups that come together. I mean, I could think of like even the Panthers and stuff,
yeah.
So I think there's always been like like a certain scare about mass groupings of people.
Of color specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's crazy. What do you know about like what's happening? Are you up to date on what's happening over there? It's so authoritarian, but like it's so crazy.
Yeah.
It's so crazy that it's gotten that bad. Before you get into that, you know what's happening in Haiti, right?
No.
Another one of our like global South friends is it like the gangs there are so bad that like people are burning gang members alive.
Yeah. So I like just speaking to like my family when I was there 2 years ago, and I think it was just like so many years of like unsafe living and like a lot of obviously murder and homicide happening there that it was I think like a lot of my aunts and stuff that are living there, they're like kind of happy with what's happening because they're able to like sort of live a normal life without having to like be extorted or stuff like that. So there is like them who like pretty much agree with what's happening, and then obviously humanitarian stuff, it's like where there's like the whole like, oh shit, is it right or wrong, right? But I think it just kind of happened from it being like just an overload of so much violence that they I think this guy that was doing is just like choosing the most logic move to like grab a group and put it away. So yeah, it's that's my understanding. It's that like just from being there, it's like I didn't really see gangs anymore. I didn't see gang members, or at least I don't know what they look like anymore because they've gone so underground that there's different things happening now. But yeah, it's safe, dude, and I think overall like it's also helping their economy in a way because now tourists are starting to go over there. So it's more of a tourist economy anyway. So they're benefiting from that. So yeah, there is like the whole thing of like locking up people for that, like for no reason. That's kind of fucked up. But it's seems like the people who are there are like agreeing with it.
Well, it's interesting, especially when you said the thing about not getting extorted, because that reminds me, like that's what brought fascism in the first place. Like that's the Italian fascism came from like. People forget that the mafia was anti-fascist, like and a lot of people were okay with that because that like Cosa Nostra stuff goes back to like the Medici. It's like classic really 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 dark stuff. And then when things go like that, like people are all for authoritarianism in those cases
because it fixes it like a problem that's like that people can't really fix because of like like these gangs,
and people support it. That's what people don't realize about fascism, that like people are for it because like I'm not for fascism, I'm just saying that like it, especially specific, and we're differentiating between Nazism and National Socialism and fascism, Italian fascism. I think that's Italian fascism is the one that has the capital F, and then regular fascism has a lowercase f. So we're talking about fascism in its origins. Like people were for that because like there's just so much crime and so much corruption. It's really interesting, and like, and it's crazy how it's also really interesting like how what people consider fascist. It like it's a term that kind of has lost a little bit of meaning. But I would definitely call that right-wing authoritarianism, and it's benefiting people and it's benefiting the society. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not putting a moral thing. It's an interesting thing to talk about. It's interesting to leave the world in a morally ambiguous place, especially all the suffering that's happening there. Like I love when Americans are like, yeah, go ahead, go fix your country. I'm like, how about you guys stop fucking with us?
For sure. Yeah, I really just think it's like them trying to fix
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
problem like the most logic way, I think. And I mean, it's kind of working in a way, you know.
Yeah,
Like I said, I think like talking to my family there, it sounds more of a sounder place and a place where they like
yeah,
want to
yeah.
be now, you know. So
Yeah. I think usually that, like, I think that makes a lot of sense. The interesting thing is it's gonna be to see where that goes. You
exactly,
know?
and that's for sure the mystery there. It's like how far is this person gonna push it?
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
does it start with these groups and then move on to other groups?
yeah. Because once you start being able to crush dissent, or I mean, once you're able to have that much control and you have support for that, it becomes weird. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
I mean, I think going back to the Italian fascist example, the big problem with them was just competence, which is like they just could not, like they wanted to invade Ethiopia and like they just couldn't. They did like they didn't have German engineering. They had like shitty Italian tanks.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, but it really is interesting how all these things are happening and like people aren't even really aware. Like it's just a highlight. Even I don't really know what's going on there.
Yeah.
You know?
No, like this guy, if you do like encounter his social media platform, like he puts out commercials that are like basically like showing them capturing these gang members and putting them away. So it's like a whole propaganda thing too, dude.
But it looks like a fucking, it looks like Starship Troopers or some shit, like some dystopian, what's his name, the RoboCop guy, the director, Paul Verhoeven kind of movie, you know, like
Yeah,
it's
they're very script. Yeah, they're
yeah.
fucking hella like.
And then yeah, especially now with all the like little like, you know, tick
Yeah,
music and shit like
for
that.
sure,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, it's very thought out, and it's definitely like pushing something like a message
Yeah.
or a propaganda, you know. So yeah, like it's interesting to see it sort of working right now, but it does, you do ponder on like what's gonna like end up happening like
Yeah. And
down.
you also do wonder like how much of that is just this guy or how much backing he has,
For
you know,
sure, you don't really
from
know.
like the you know, the same people that want to take resources from Bolivia and all that,
Yeah,
like all
yeah,
these coups, like, you know.
for sure. I mean, yeah, it's hard to tell, but yeah, absolutely. There's all of that for sure. Like who is like guiding them, or who's, you know, who's really a part of it too, you know. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that there is more than just him, probably. So
And then that stuff was Iran Contra related, the civil war, or was that Nicaragua more?
The Contras were in Nicaragua.
That was Nicaragua.
Yeah,
Okay.
Nicaragua.
So so those that was the fight against Sandinistas and whatnot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
which are also leftists.
It's very
It's all
it's very
anti-communism.
similar though. It's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
similar. Just yeah, Nicaragua was I think it might have been around the same time too,
yeah,
actually,
yeah.
in
I
the
think it was.
80s.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. But it's definitely like the
But no
Nicaragua.
Salvadoran money bought crack cocaine and brought it to South Central. We can't tie that whole loop
I
for you.
have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, who knows, dude? Like I just saw that show Snowfall,
Yeah, yeah.
and
The first, you know who I hate is the Mexican character, the woman who's like you know, who they tell her that she's like a curse.
I don't remember. Is that the wrestlers like
Yeah,
partner?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like her character, I just don't like the way she's written.
yeah.
You know, because it's like she's just a downer.
It's a really cool story though, I think, and it's also interesting. Like I know a lot of the blocks that they filmed in
Uh,
South Central, so I'm very familiar with the areas that they use filming there. So
were there people that scary? Like, there's one guy that is like that they end up having helped them, and then they realize that they're into something too big, like, and he just rapes somebody. Like, were there scary people, scary prison
oh yeah, yeah, I don't know.
personalities like that in the
I'm
neighborhood?
sure, dude.
You
There's
just didn't come across them.
oh, thank God, man. No, but I'm sure there was, dude. There was definitely a lot of like, I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of culture that's also very embedded with like prison culture. That's like people who are coming in and out of prison. So there was like crazy shit that you would like hear about, like
Don't talk to that
yeah,
dude.
yeah, or don't walk into this block, or
Yeah,
don't wear these chucks with these color laces in here, like shit like that,
like
you know.
that.
Yeah, for
Did you
sure.
were you always watching out? Like you, I know that. Do you know all the hats and what neighborhood they represent? Like, if I say
Yeah,
Yankees, you're gonna be able to tell me who it is.
pretty much,
Oh,
man.
really?
Yeah.
What neighborhood is Yankees?
Well, it's like I the neighborhoods will wear it a lot. The neighborhood Crips will wear that a lot.
Okay.
So I grew up in a Crip neighborhood, and
Okay.
that's kind of how I remember like the neighborhood thing, the NY. But yeah, it's a thing that I also picked up pretty early on was like the uniform,
Mm.
like what you wore in certain places, and like each baseball cap did. So that's why I would always try to wear like an LA one because that was like the neutral.
Okay. LA is neutral. All right.
Yeah, it's like the neutral. So like every other letter kind of meant something. There was
Yeah.
like the Florida Marlins, so the F was for Florence, the gang.
Oh,
So there
okay.
was like, you had to just be careful, especially if you pushed it and like were bald and shit with a hat on. Like, it just or
Bald.
yeah,
What does bald mean?
like have no hair. Like they used to
No, no,
bust
no.
them.
I know. I'm
Yeah,
just
like
saying. Like, what is that? That's just a signal that you're like.
yeah, so a lot that was kind of one of the prominent like hairstyles that like gangs used. Like
Okay.
they're buzzed or bald, pelones.
See, but there weren't like white guys rocking that in
No,
the
no, no.
gangs.
These were like
Were there
these.
any white guys in these neighborhoods?
I'm sure. I
Yeah.
mean, like also too, there was like a cross of like brown folks going into black gangs, and I'm sure there was black dudes going into brown gangs. So it was
Mhm.
just there was a lot of like where exactly or what block you grew up in, So there was like mixture of stuff, but yeah, that was like if you added the bald head with the cap and stuff, But yeah, there was like a uniform thing with color, with baseball
Mm.
hats. You wore how baggy your clothes was and stuff. It spoke, it was very loud of a thing. So
So you sorry, go ahead. You were gonna say
yeah,
something.
so I grew up just kind of like I knew that from a very young age. Like, oh shit, you don't wear this here, you don't wear this there.
What were there rules as a non-affiliated graffiti artist that you had to follow so that you wouldn't like catch beefs? Because I know like the whole crossing people out shit, at least in Florida,
Yeah.
got pretty serious.
So there, obviously, like what's different with graffiti crews and gangs is that
Mm.
gangs take up a turf, and graffiti crews kind of just navigate the whole city. Like the point is to get
So the gang graffiti is like it's like a dog pissing his territory
pretty
essentially.
much like you would only see that sort of gang graffiti in that certain radius, right?
Okay.
But for graph writers, it was kind of like you were just all over the city. So I came to East LA, I came to the West Side, downtown, South Central. We were trying to just get everywhere, right? That was the goal, was to like put as much mark everywhere.
Mhm.
But there was definitely things where like and this was kind of crazy too, because a lot of this was just rumor based, like this is before social media. So, you would just hear about things, but there were certain gangs who didn't like graffiti writers writing in their
Yeah,
blocks
yeah, yeah.
pretty much. So
That
there,
makes
there
sense.
was like green lights and stuff like that they would say like, oh, don't tag on this block or don't tag on these streets, because
Mm.
so it was just a lot of like code of the street type of thing. But yeah, so grew up like knowing the uniform thing, and then when I did the graft stuff, like for sure there was that too. You had to
How,
just be very careful, dude, because it was like
well, I mean, crews were beefing too, no? I mean, not to the same level of violence, but you could get your ass beat, I'm sure.
dude, there was some crews that were doing
Especially.
it to that same element of
Oh,
violence.
really? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there was definitely that too. I think you had so much beef with someone that eventually it got to that point.
Did you have a crew or
Yeah, so I was one part of a crew in South Central, and
you're still
I don't
you
really
no
paint a lot.
okay,
Like
you don't vandalize, but you still
I mean that shit's almost legal now, dude. But
Oh, is it
I
really?
mean it seems like it, but it's just a little different than when I was like doing it. Like
Wow, wow.
but yeah, it was I grew up with a handful of friends, and we all were part of it, and it was great when we were all like, this is all before like,
This was Three Strikes era.
no, this was probably like 2006.
When
I think
was
it's more than that, but yeah, I think it fell into it. But it was like it was just like my teenager years, kind of.
Oh, that's right. You were born in 90, so you weren't 10 until like 2000.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was more of my teenage years when I was out there doing that, and then but I like it's a pretty big part of like who I am still, and I met a lot of lifetime friends through it, people who I still hang out with.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, there was definitely like a lot of shit going on, dude, with graph too,
Yeah.
and there was that whole like beef stuff on the buses and stuff. I
On the
just,
buses.
I just, I try my best to avoid it because for me, I wasn't trying to really be a tag banger or anything. I just really like to climb stuff and paint. Like that was
Yeah.
really my thing. Like I like to be out late and like I like the whole experience. Like I wasn't trying to like do it. I wasn't trying to slash people or anything to like get known or anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just I saw it different. But there was definitely those people out there who were more like hotheads who were like start shit with people or whatever. I just kind of enjoyed it more for what I got from it, as an experience.
And then when did you start like catching on to fine art?
I met some friends that were a little bit older than I was who were painting also graph, but
Hmm.
they were also painting.
Transitioning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were also painting easel paintings or like canvas paintings and stuff. And during those days, we would steal a lot of the paint we used. Like that was kind of how it was. And so
Well, they probably weren't selling kids, teenagers
yeah,
paint.
so you had
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of boost it, but it was so I remember boosting some acrylic paint and I was like in maybe 11th grade when I started to like try it.
Hmm.
And then I obviously liked it a lot and it was way different than the rush I got from doing it outdoors and stuff. But it was a nice experimenting it with in high school and then moving into like community college. I knew I wanted to go to school. I just wasn't too sure of what I wanted to do. So I got to ELAC. I went to East LA College, and there I started just trying a bunch of different subjects, dude. And I tried a bunch of different art stuff too, like photography, ceramics, and eventually I just narrowed into like painting.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like, I had already tried it, but I did try other shit just to see like, oh shit, what am I good at or whatever.
Were you into sculpture and whatnot? You tried all of
Just
that?
ceramics
Yeah.
mostly, dude. Ceramics was cool, and then but I just kind of knew like my strong feeling for was painting, so I kept going, and I was really like trying, dude, to like get better at it, and it took a long ass time. I mean, I feel like I'm still learning a lot from it, so but yeah, that was kind of like my transition from it is just getting influenced by my older homies
Yeah. Yeah.
who were doing it. Uh, but yeah, dude, I hopped into it without ever thinking I could actually make a living out of it. Like I had no idea. Like I didn't know anyone that had
Yeah.
done
Yeah.
that. So I was just like, oh shit, maybe I go to school and just kind of do it as like after work type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Had
Yeah.
no
On the
clue. I
side.
had no clue, dude. Like, and I was going even through undergrad, not knowing that I was ever gonna like, get to where I've gotten right now. So but the one thing is like I kind of never stopped doing it. I
Yeah.
was always just fucking
Always painting.
painting. Yeah.
And so, how? Okay, then like, I mean, uh, how, you showed in Italy. That was before grad school, right?
That was during.
That was during grad school.
Yeah.
Okay, and then how did you start? Like, how did you get into like if someone doesn't know what the hustle is to try to get representation and whatnot? I mean,
Yeah.
was that even something you were shooting for, or is it just something that happened?
I think I don't know if I was like specifically shooting for it, but I knew that it was like sort of like a milestone in the journey.
Hmm.
Um but yeah, like for a while I was doing it on my own and I didn't know like where to park my car yet, type of thing. But when it felt right, that's when it
Hmm.
came, sort of.
Yeah,
So
but I mean, you've been looking to get shows. You're just applying. Like, how did you get the shows in Italy? Like, are you just meeting people?
so it
Are you applying? Are you like reaching out to people? How does that early stage while you're in grad school to now, like what does that look like for somebody that would maybe not necessarily be able to emulate it, but maybe like take it as like as some way as a
right.
guide as some kind of a guide.
Right. The thing is that there really isn't like a straight
Yeah, yeah,
trail. I think it kind of happens different for everyone. I do know of people that have like applied to stuff, I I never did. I kind of started off like getting into shows from people that I either met
Hmm.
somehow that organized them, or sometimes it happened through teachers
Hmm.
who I became close with, like that were teaching me during college and stuff. And then it was a lot of that for a while, like, just group shows. People would ask me like, "Oh, you want to throw on a piece?" The one thing about me though, it's just like whenever the opportunity came, I kind of always had something ready.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
so I was always willing to like show. I was like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, fuck it." Like the more people could see my work, the better I thought it would be, right? So I get to grad school, and then that's been kind of happening where I was still kind of sending stuff and showing or whatever. And um then I think like there was like this thing that was like, I don't know when it happened, but when I was in undergrad, there was like uh there was like an art world, I think, that was more fixed on like abstraction,
Hmm.
that I remember. Like abstraction was what I was seeing in a lot of spaces and galleries and stuff.
Because you do a lot of figurative work for people that haven't seen
I do figuration.
exclusively.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't really dive into anything else but like representational art, mostly
Hmm.
painting, right? So I think there was like a shift that was happening right around the time I was leaving undergrad, where figuration was kind of like, I started seeing it pop into galleries more.
Yeah.
And so I only took a year of a break from undergrad to grad school. So I kind of went right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was in my late 20s by the time I got to New York. And by the time I got there, it was kind of already a complete shift into like more this is all just me seeing the things. I'm not sure if it was like necessarily this way, but
Yeah, in hindsight, it's really easy to see the stepping
yeah, yeah,
stones.
yeah.
But I mean, that is what I asked you for. So.
For sure, for sure. So I saw the figuration stuff coming in, and it just so happened that I was also doing figuration. It just so happened that at that time it felt like a lot of colored people were also coming into these new spaces, in galleries and stuff.
Color people, like people that work with a lot of color, or
No,
people
like
of color.
yeah, like
Okay.
people of color. So I started to notice that as well, where obviously I was kind of young into it too,
Hmm.
but I did see that people that looked like me were starting to like
Yeah, yeah.
show everywhere.
Around when did that start happening? That's a
It's hard for me to like pin a year. It's just kind of, it might have been happening before, but it's just
you
when
just
I
noticed
started
it.
to notice it, I'm like, oh shit,
What
this.
year was that for you? What year did you notice that?
um Maybe like 2018,
Yeah.
2017, maybe. This is just when I noticed it. I'm sure it's been
Yeah,
happening
yeah.
since before, but
Well,
I
it's funny you say that because I'm like, oh yeah, maybe Trump is to to blame because everybody was like, all of a sudden, like really aware of race.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
And
just because I think when I remember being younger and going to shows, they were mostly not
no,
people
no,
that
the
were like me,
'90s, yeah, yeah,
So
the
when I
'90s for
was a
sure.
kid, like a teenager, and I did sneak into like art shows,
Yeah,
there were never portraits of stuff that looked like me or anything, right? So I started to notice it more as like I got to like, maybe it's just also like a growth thing, and I got a little older and I started to like see it more, right? But
mm,
I saw that change from abstraction to figuration happening, and then I saw kind of like more people like me showing, and then social media, dude. I use social media. I would post my paintings there, and like that slowly linked me to people. And I was also trying to like go see shows.
mm.
I think that also helped to meet people, curators and stuff like
At
that.
galleries, not at museums, or at both.
At both, yeah,
Yeah,
at both. But for sure, like for the network thing was more gallery
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
right? But yeah, I was out there seeing that and trying to connect, and social media definitely linked me to a lot of people.
I mean, social media has been my tool for like just meeting. I mean, because I definitely do a different. I lead with the show
Yeah, yeah,
more
yeah,
than my art,
for
but
sure.
which I'm fine with.
Yeah,
But it is a pretty useful tool in terms of like, I mean, most of the people I book,
they come from.
they
Yeah,
come,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, especially at this point, like referrals are really helpful,
yeah, yeah.
and like it's a really good tool. So I think it's like, I think sometimes people get caught up on the idea of like selling their work through their Instagram and all of that. And I'm like,
Right.
yeah, maybe like somewhere down the line, dude, the benefits that come before that.
Yeah, I would just post it
Yeah,
mostly, dude.
yeah,
I would just post my stuff for sure. Since I was like in undergrad, I would start posting, and obviously everybody sees social media, so that linked me to people in Europe
yeah. Hmm.
And it sometimes just started from conversations, but um I'm thankful that they saw something in the work, and
Yeah.
that opened doors for me too.
Well, and then it sounds like a 1-2 punch, right? Because if you meet someone at a gallery, it's become kind of like the business card
For sure.
of our era.
For sure.
And
Let me
so
get
that,
your
and
IG.
then they're like they met you, they like you, and then they see your work, and then like, oh, okay, So it's interesting how that works.
So yeah, there was that, and then there was obviously people that I met through teachers too. Like they actually introduced me to certain people who were.
You had nice teachers. None of my teachers saw me as competition.
Yeah.
It was at FIU. It was a really small art market.
Okay, yeah. No, I was lucky enough to have those certain people help me, So super thankful for that, and I would say that's kind of like how it happened for me. But it took
it's
forever,
still fresh.
dude.
Yeah.
It took forever though, for sure. It wasn't like a overnight thing at all. It took a long time.
Yeah, you had to go to like several years of school twice.
Yeah.
3.5 years for graduate school. That's almost another BFA.
Yeah, I did 3 for a BFA too.
Yeah.
So.
You did 3 for a BFA? Oh, okay.
So I did, and I did 2 in community college. So
yeah.
It's a long time of school, dude.
I know, dude. That shit ain't easy.
But I honestly wouldn't do it any other way, man.
Yeah.
Like I think that coming out through that system was like also super helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's dope. But not to elevate some schools over others, but you also like didn't go to like the fast track schools. Like we both know or
What do you mean by fast track?
I would say like or the path that I've seen, like people go through from at Santa Monica College to like UCLA.
Okay.
Do you know Gauzier?
No, I don't.
Ogini, he's friends with Emmanuel, but even Emmanuel, like he went through UCLA. I feel like UCLA opens things up a little bit easier than if you're going to like a long, like
for sure
Cal State
or
Long Beach.
or like going to Yale maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So I would it's also credit to like your like the thing that you've got.
For sure.
I don't want everybody to think that they can get into shit ton of debt.
I don't know. Like the one thing that I would see like from colleagues at Hunter or like even going to Long Beach, for sure Long Beach, it being a Cal State school and a public school, it was super affordable and it fucking really taught you how to paint. Like I think most people that came from there, even before me, like we were able to paint like really well, So that prepared us a little bit more, I would say. And for sure, there is like those like schools that do open a lot of doors for you.
Am I downplaying Hunter just because I don't know it? Would you say Hunter is like a really prestigious school?
It's so.
I'm also not gonna make you bash your
no. I honestly, I enjoyed my time there, and the people that I met there.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was an amazing experience being there. So Hunter is in New York, and it's their neighboring Columbia, which is an Ivy League school. So there is like the whole like Hunter being public and the Ivy League school sort of balance thing. So
so it is a public school?
Hunter is, yeah, it's a public, it's a CUNY, it's a city university school. So so it is public opposed to Columbia, that's Ivy League.
So you did it right because you're not in a shit ton of debt.
Yeah, so it's affordable and it's still in New York City. But yeah, it doesn't like it's prestigious for sure, but like it's still public compared to like Yale, right? So, but the one thing I do notice about the people who come out of more of a public sort of system like Hunter too as well, is that you're kind of, because you don't have like that gatekeeping opening up right away for you coming out of like a bigger school, you do got to work harder.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think like you're grinding a lot more, and you have to be a little bit more ambitious too. So I think all that shit kind of helps. You're kind of like the underdog in the race.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's great, dude. It's great to like have that sort of like, oh shit, I gotta try it a little bit better. I gotta try. No, I mean, I'm
giving you props, like hard props, because I like it's one thing to like be really good and get into a really good school. It's another thing to like be really good, get into a school you can afford, and then get really, really good.
Yeah, so there's the push, dude, that I think sometimes lacks in like going into a big school that
Yeah,
like
yeah,
opens it up for you right away, you know?
yeah, yeah,
So I that's why I'm saying like I think they're both
yeah, yeah, yeah.
good trips to do. Maybe whatever luck you have to get into one or the other, right? But it can still work out is what I'm trying to say. Like
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
really
It
want
also
it and you
sounds
work hard, I think you can get it for sure.
it also sounds like there's a huge benefit for because that it's a UC school because I mean the teaching is going to be good to some degree, right? You seem to have really good like I went to Florida. I just feel like the market there is so small and everybody's so competitive with each other,
Yeah.
and it's like, like teachers are trying to get gallery shows and they're like there's only so many gallery shows to go around, whereas like over here it sounds like, you know I mean I've met people like I met Emily Silver, who teaches at Santa Monica College, and like her episode gave me a huge boost, and it's like this is a teacher at a community college,
Yeah.
and like her episode is like markedly like improved my listenership, and
That's dope.
but it's interesting, like I feel like there are teachers out here that I've interviewed that like kind of make me feel bad about, or make me feel like, oh man, like a school can work for people,
Yeah.
there are people that care, that are not just bitter and like tenured in some place that
For
they're not happy and they
sure.
feel like, they could have been something but they're not,
Yes. So what's also cool about like it's like those adjuncts that you kind of get coming into these schools. Like some of them teach at like bigger schools,
yeah,
but
yeah,
they also come teach at your school, you know?
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like you still kind of get some of that from some teachers as well. So I was lucky enough to have like certain professors who were adjunct coming into these programs that were like really, really interesting, you know, like, and that they also taught at bigger schools. So yeah, and you're getting it for a fraction almost of
yeah, yeah.
like for sure. So
Damn, dude, I'm just so excited that you're gonna be able to pay off your your loans in your lifetime.
yeah, man, that's the goal. I mean, it's yeah.
Congratulations. Anything that I can that I haven't asked you about that you want to talk about, like, because we've gone for like an hour and 22 minutes. I
Okay.
don't want to take too much of your time, and I also don't want to keep drilling you for information
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you've
yeah.
given me a lot. But if there's anything that you want to say before you got anything that we touched on that you wanted to go back to,
Yeah.
and it's cool if you don't.
Not sure when you're gonna put this out, but I do want to just talk about my show that I have up
Oh
right
yeah,
now.
yeah, I can put it
Yeah.
out like soon. Yeah,
Okay, yeah. So that's up until the 16th, which is like a week
a
away.
week away.
Yeah, it's a
So
solo show that I have at Charlie James #2, his second location. It's on
yeah,
the same street on Chungking Road.
he's
Um,
got two spots in Chungking now.
yeah, they're
Okay.
pretty close to each other though. So most of the time, if you see one space, you could see the other
Yeah, yeah.
space too. It's very close by. So yeah, I have that show up until the 16th, and it's titled House Money. Um, so yeah, just wanted
Yeah.
to bring that up.
Oh, I mean, definitely gonna plug. There's a plug section. I mean, I get. Do you want to talk about what the show more and like what's in the show, what the
Okay.
show's about,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
did you just want to plug it?
No, I can talk about it for just
Okay,
a quick. So yeah, I titled it House Money. It's
like casino term.
no, well, yeah, I kind of got it from there too, from the gambling term. But I was thinking a lot about security and like what house money really is in the household, you know, like savings and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of you're all good. There's a lot of like little motifs in the paintings of like security boxes that are like basically shoe boxes that I have like stashes throughout the paintings.
mm,
There's a lot of domesticity happening in the paintings. We're showing a lot of like the apartment that I grew up, but then also other apartments that I lived in New York and in LA. So it's a lot of figuration, a lot of portraits of family members, and it's touching on the inherited trauma through the transfer thing that I was explaining. I'm using this essay by Ursula Le Guin. It's
okay.
called The Container Bag Theory of Fiction.
Hmm.
And she talks a lot about kind of like how the container was like the first invention by human beings, like cavemen gathering,
Yeah, yeah.
hunting and stuff to house stuff or to save stuff. And so I'm using sort of the container metaphorically to use like the actual safety boxes or security boxes that are stashing the important documents and money, obviously, But then I'm also thinking of like the apartments also being like a container that hold
Yeah,
our
yeah.
stuff, and then lastly the actual figure and body that's holding the memories that are being seen through the body, through the transfer that I was telling you about. So yeah, it's a nice batch of paintings and some drawings that are kind of all
They're
touching on.
beautiful. I mean, I've seen them from like
Thank you.
when Josh recommended you, I was excited. I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember this guy." And then
So
I had seen the paintings and I was so, yeah, dude,
thank
like
you.
it's a very good show.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, if it comes out if it ends next week, this is going to come out after
it's all good.
because I think this week is like this week's episode I just put out.
Okay,
So like cuz I put them out on Sundays.
gotcha.
But everybody's gonna get to hear about an awesome show that passed.
Yeah.
Well, we usually plug things even like if the episode comes way after anyway.
Okay, cool.
But it's good. It's good to hear. Like it's good to talk about this stuff.
For sure.
Um, what that's an interesting like that's a theme that comes up a lot in terms of like uh the body embodying things, right? Like it is an interesting container, and what it contains is really, fascinating. So
Sure.
so it's cool that you have like that you've been able to get like those moments where something clicks and you're like, oh shit, like this is how I can translate this visually
Yeah,
are pretty exciting. So
yeah,
like that, the fact that that's what the paintings hold, is I mean, I've seen details and stuff like that.
yeah,
I'm definitely going to check it out. It's right here. So
for sure.
what are the gallery hours this week?
I think it's from Tuesday to Saturday.
Tuesday to Saturday?
Yeah,
Okay. And I guess I'll just look it up. But I'll,
yeah.
I'll
Hours. I can't. I don't know. I want to say it's from 10 to like 5
it's
maybe,
fine,
but
dude. I
you should
mean,
check up on
this
that.
is
Yeah,
the listeners don't care at
yeah,
this
yeah,
point
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's going to be closed. But I definitely want to check it out before it's closed. I didn't know it was closing this soon.
Yeah,
But
it's
it's
been up
been
for
up
a
for a
while.
while. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then anything else that we can plug for you?
Um,
Anything else coming up? Or actually, real quick, what do you think? What like now that you've hit this milestone,
yeah.
where does your head go next? Like, are you trying to get international shows? Are you like what that's like a pretty big ambition that all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, it's in my hands.
Yeah.
Like what do you do? Like I mean, it's not fair of me to ask you since it's so
Yeah.
new.
I think it's definitely like just keeping the momentum going. I think keeping the work going at the level that it's going.
You got into LA Times, right? They did a write
Yeah,
up
I
on your
have a write
piece.
up on the show.
That's a very big
For
accomplishment. Thank
sure.
you.
Yeah, yeah. And then yeah, it's just kind of taking it as it comes too, because you know, you do get these offers, but you know, it's just kind of like timing and trying to figure out what the next push
Yeah.
forward is. But yeah, yeah, I definitely think about international stuff. I do have a show in January in the UK, so
Oh,
it'll be like my
congrats.
first time showing in the UK. So yeah, dude, it's just kind of like being strategic about what moves forward, kind of help, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, um,
This is all really interesting information because you don't always get to sit down and talk for an hour and 30 minutes with somebody. One thing is interesting, and refreshing, is that I don't feel an imposter syndrome from you. Is that accurate? Do you at any point feel undeserving? It's fine if you do, but I just don't get that feeling. I get the feeling that you feel like you've worked hard,
hella, dude, hella. I
which is dope. Like I mean,
yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, for sure. Nah, dude, because the other thing too is that I like I really don't know what else I'd be doing.
Yeah.
This is like I found what I love truly to do, you know. So I've been very lucky to like be able to use what I like doing, and then
That's
you know.
awesome that you're not burdened by your own success. Because
And
that's a
then,
bitch, man. Can you
yeah,
imagine?
I bet. No, man, I'm just like super blessed to like have the
Yeah.
opportunities, you know.
Yeah. But you're all, but I like that you recognize that like it seems like you have a healthy enough relationship to it that it's not stressing you out.
No, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure, for sure.
which is nice.
For
It's
now,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
For now, it's like it's very like it's manageable. Like I definitely like figure out ways to like try to not overwork, you know, and like kind of keep things fresh, shit, you know.
What's your like day job and gallery time balance? Do you have a day job?
So I teach.
You teach. Okay.
Yeah, I teach a little, and I just started teaching actually. So it's like a very new thing. Um, so I'm doing that and painting.
And then studio time, painting time. How much out of the week? Like what is it?
So, dude, I don't really do much, but that like I just teach, and I just came from
So
my studio right now.
so it's like a full-time schedule painting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I tried to put in like what would be a full-time job, but there's painting, and then
Okay.
I do the teaching too, like
Yeah.
in between.
Cool.
Yeah, but definitely like I'm there
Almost
like
a full-time job.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's great. Like I love when I do get to get out, because it's like refreshing after putting in work type of
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, for the most part, yeah, I'm definitely there most of the time. It's just that and teaching or spending time with my girlfriend and at home and stuff. That's
Yeah.
really it, dude.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It's been a pleasure. I thank you.
Likewise.
We talked about a lot of dark stuff, and I appreciate you sharing like personal family history. That's intense. But I think that that is one of the things that I really enjoy talking to people about, because everybody's perspective is so different in this art scene, and then I think that the perspective of Latin American countries is one that resonates a lot with me, because I think that as a global South, we are all sort of tied in some ways.
For sure, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, which is really interesting. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, dude, it's been a pleasure. I'd love to have you back on, and I hope to run into you at openings again.
Absolutely.
Now that I know, that's my favorite part. Like
now
after an interview, I can be like, "Hey, what's up, man?"
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's not like we have to meet like 50 times to get comfortable with each other.
For sure. For sure.
But yeah. And then thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week with another guest and another topic that may or may not be art related.